It's the 26th of December, Boxing Day. My apologies here. It's the last week of 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. I hope you're having a good holiday. Of course, unless you're the nuclear industry. And then, like everybody else on the planet who comes to their senses at some point, I have incredible disrespect for you and contempt for your assault upon humanity and the species. This is journalism, folks, where they just tell you the same lies for 80 years. That's what journalism actually is. It's pointless. If we have no future, they have no future either. Growing food alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. It just doesn't even seem conceivable. In a nuclear wasteland, in an evacuation zone, the show's just starting. Hello, Chicago. Let me guess. That's Japan. So why are they growing food in a nuclear wasteland right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation? We got 3 people on our show, and one of them is a nuclear troll who I just blocked their phone number. Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns monstrously evil? There's obviously only one answer. It's just not conceivable. So where are the universities? Where are the international energy agencies? Where are the watchdogs, the regulatory agencies? Why aren't they denouncing that? If they're not denouncing it, they're condoning it. And that means you've lost your planet and you need to claw it back. It's not somebody else's job, it's your job. All 3 of us. They're so threatened by the conversation with 3 people on my show, they're calling in trying to disrupt me. In this November the 7th, 2013, members of the media are claiming they're in a building that actually doesn't even exist. Radiation is so harmless, they're going to pretend they're in a building that don't exist. So you don't ask any questions and try to protect yourself from food from a nuclear wasteland. Decades of reactor cores were at the top of the building, unlike Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a new reactor. What we're going to do today is we got 56,000 plus screen captures to get through over the next 5, 6, 7 days. It's just not possible. It can't be done. That's a whole year of 5 days a week shows, by the way. And usually I'll bring in a lot of supporting documentation. So last year we covered approximately 120,000 pieces of information. 120,000. Half of it was documentation. And for that massive feat, I have 2 people on my show. Even if there's nobody here, I still have to do the show because nobody else is going to have this conversation, so we're forced to do what we do. There's no fun in doing this. This is the remains of Reactor 3. This was a 190-foot building like Reactor 2 you see where my finger is pointed. This building was completely ejected. The only thing left was a stump of a 190-foot building. The industry built this off-site, laid it on top with cranes of the stump of Reactor 3, and the worldwide media came out and said, look, they're getting the fuel out of the building that don't even exist. These are all fake pictures. I've got a bit of a frog in my throat here. Hang on. I don't know where that came from. I don't think it matters. Let's keep her rolling. So we're going to flash through the majority of the stories we covered in 2022. And flash through is we're going to bring up the headline, maybe a paragraph of some or two or three of important ones. Just going to try to run our way through this for 6 days and try to get through a recap of 2022, because currently everything we talked about has gone down a black hole and we have to resurrect it, so to speak. This was the first story we covered in 2022. Finland ends homelessness and provides shelter for everybody because they don't have a large military-industrial complex and nuclear industry raping the country. Japan had picked up 30 million one-ton bags, and they're giving their homeless employees paper suits and trying to convince them that all is well. There's a legion of scum in the nuclear industry to promote it. And one thing, if you start looking at nuclear closely, is you notice almost every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms, and that's because they're all hemorrhaging radiation. One of the first stories was children were thrown off an airplane because this is female hockey junior players. It just shows you this disarray of reality, right? Comparing catastrophes, how would a global and small nuclear war impact our planet? We've had small nuclear wars, many of them. They're called nuclear testing. They're the same bombs, the same radioactive fallout, the same nuclear wasteland. And just to give you a quick example, the Russia's former Soviet Union, biggest bomb that we know about was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki plutonium bombs going off at the same time. That's a nuclear war. That's two countries firing 1,900 nuclear Nagasaki-sized 20-kiloton weapons at each other. That's a nuclear war. America has done multiple similar large ones. This ingenious wall could harness enough power to cover your electric bill. So the wall is just each little, what looks like a square is actually a windmill. And so the wind blows through it. You can put it anywhere on your property. And it can dramatically change your heating bill for sure. It's a simple device. Anybody could actually build one. And immediately you can change the whole planet with something like that, mass-produced, right? So many stories to get through. It's really something. Japan nuclear research set to revive on U.S. fast reactor project. U.S. fast reactors. Another name is breeder reactors. These are prolific hot isotopes, hot particles producers, and these are emitted constantly from the facilities. Once it goes into fuel pool, it's hemorrhaging from the fuel pools because they're still splitting the same atoms they would for millions of homes. Called a midwife, creator says nuclear test veteran still needs an answer 70 years on. I remember there's one story where United Kingdom, one of the medias finally got the courage to be honest and told the Prime Minister, look the veterans, the nuclear test victims in the eyes and tell them it's in their head, all the illnesses and diseases. Wosley says, come back nuclear energy, all is forgiven. No, all is not forgiven. Will never. It's not supposed to exist. It's the dirtiest industry in human history, just like it always has been for 80 years of deceit and genocide, omnicide against our planet from the emissions. At what point should we say that's enough? What point? Should have been said 80 years ago. And DEMA to test emergency sirens at Salem's nuclear plant. It's like we cover these stories all year long. The reason they have sirens is because of 3 Mile Island. Activists had legislation enacted that they have to have sirens. But that don't mean they're going to use it if they have emissions, illegal emissions, which is constant. They have 37 sirens, which is very few. We've seen them up to 165 sirens within 10 miles. European Union draws up plan to label natural gas and nuclear energy products as green investments. Well, they've done that, but that doesn't mean it's green. But what had happened was other countries said, well, Europe says it's green, so we want green bonds. The industry is actually nothing but goblins. And goblins would be friendly compared to what they're actually like in real life. These incredible, monstrous, sadistic demons. And even the cartoon industry is, the Hulk, before it became movies and stuff like this, cartoons, it was comic books. And the Hulk was created by the nuclear industry to disenfranchise your children from reality, and generations of it have now passed. And people actually go out and buy Hulk costumes and Hulk sleeping bags and Hulk pillowcases for their children, not understanding, incapable of comprehending the harm they're actually doing to their children and the entire species. Limited time Pokemon calf in Iwaki Prefecture promotes tourism in the nuclear wasteland itself. So Pokemon is these, you can buy them figures now, but they're basically like baseball cards. It was weaponized against the children in particular, because that's who covered it, and used to bludgeon their common sense. Emma Watson post in support of Palestinians angers Israelis' envoys. Israel terrified of anybody asking the question of why is the 4th biggest weapons producer on the planet, Israel, using the children as targets for new and vicious and violent weapons and apartheid. And it's a legitimate question. They have a long history of meddling in other people's country and screams victim if anybody points a finger at them. Screams that they're the victim when they are the victimizers. They are the misery machine. They're the 4th biggest producers of weapons, for goodness sakes. Look, another nuclear power plant surrounded by farms. What's the odds? What is that odds? EDF chief sees power price surge. I got some very, very hot tea here. Maybe that'll cut whatever the hell is in my throat up. EDF chief sees a power price surge, spurring a nuclear reform efforts. Again, they show you pictures of nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. They pretend that they're some kind of humans, and they don't have any attribute that a human should have. Their attributes are disgusting. Frightening new details emerge about mysterious brain injuries, illnesses in Canada. Canada lifted all restrictions on Fukushima food after 93 days. 55 countries kept the restrictions for a decade. So the only place they can send the most radioactive food was Canada, and that's what they done. And this is what you expect to show up in the years following it, right? Polaris 21, a high-intensity combat exercise on board a aircraft carrier. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of those fighter jets, I wonder? 1,000, 2,000, 5,000? How many suicide bombers does it take to equal an aircraft carrier's and its 50-year legacy of just destruction? I really want to know. Umbilical cord blood donations offer hope to those in Japan in need of stem cells. Just about everybody in Japan should have been evacuated. Going to a nuclear meltdown in a paper suit. At least the people at Hanford in the United States, they get Scotty backpacks and not real good suits, but better, a million times better than these suits. They're holding a wick to see which way the wind is blowing because they're at a nuclear meltdown in a paper suit. TEPCO says they burn 7,000 of these paper suits each day, by the way. You're in la-la land if you're in that environment. And that's not nuclear engineers, nuclear scientists, or nuclear companies, or nuclear experts, or anybody like that. You'll never get them there. If it is, they're not going to be in no paper suit, I can tell you that much. The Pentagon and the CIA have shaped thousands of Hollywood movies into super effective propaganda. Key lessons from the proliferation of disinformation. That actually is a great story, and that's a super important story, and so is that one there that I actually forgot about. That's what kills me when I'm doing something like this, is all these stories you forget about after 12 months, for instance, of nothing but stories. North Korea fires a ballistic missile. How many did America fire that month? How many did Israel fire that month? Come on, right? And so all the media come out screeching that North Korea fired a missile. North Korea hasn't attacked anybody in 70 years, despite that's all everybody done to them for 70 years is attacked them. North Korea does anything, they're your instant boogeyman. And so when you got media participating in something like this, and you don't ask the question, what does that say about people? The media literally lost their mind because North Korea is trying to defend itself. And I mean, Americans are there carrying out provocative, joint exercises militarily with South Korea. 70 years. And the United Nations went in and burnt down every town, every village, every city in the entire country in the 50s, and has land, sea, and air embargoes against them for 70 years. And that same period, United Nations and America and Britain have attacked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of countries. And South Korea didn't attack anybody. EU delays deadline on green finance taxonomy rules for nuclear and gas. They waited until January the 1st, because January the 1st, France took over the EU. Because countries hold it for 6 months. So on January 1st, France stepped in. The very first thing came out of their mouth was nuclear was green, which of course it wasn't. What does that tell us? It tells you when you got a handful of people calling the shots, you no longer have a country or a future. You have made the worst mistake imaginable. Hear the sounds of sirens coming from the Catawba nuclear plant. How many sirens do they have? Duke Energy will all sound at once, terrorizing every child. And if they have a nuclear accident, they're never going to use the sirens. The industry is completely, 100% unequivocally, never going to use the sirens. We got a poll tonight. I mean, this is the ultimate. How is this even possible? And because there's multiple pictures like this from Japan, Japan should be excluded from trading with any country worldwide. They're the epitome of monsters. You got to be a monster to do something like that. You actually got to be a monster. Again, look where he's walking. He's walking on steel plates. You can see Medusa in the foreground, which is reactor 3. And he's wearing an absolute idiotic paper suit. He stood up in an area sprayed by regions. The green stuff he stood on is stuff they sprayed there, and he's pointing to a hot particle. This guy is walking within a line of sight of multiple nuclear meltdowns, in particular a mixed oxide fuel meltdown when multiple fuel pools disappeared and would have sprayed that whole area, hence the reason they got steel plates laid there. I'm ashamed of planet Earth. I'm ashamed of every university on this planet that have sat in silence. Green nuclear power or greenwashing, the Irish Times, who promotes nuclear despite the fact it's actually illegal in Ireland. Yeah, it's greenwashing. Of course it's greenwashing. And what did he show you? They show you the picture. EU must spend $550 billion on nuclear to meet a climate goal. This is trying to rob the country of a future, these types of people. And show you a nuclear plant surrounded by farms. New-scale, compact nuclear plant developers plan to go public. They don't have a reactor. They've been in business 18 years. They don't have a full draft into the regulatory agencies. They don't have an actual model. And they're going to go public. Not going to, they did. Public. With no hope of actually having a facility for 10 to 15 years that they can sell. There's neither one on the planet, so they have to develop it. They don't. It's absurd that something like that could happen, but that's how throttled your planet actually is by the nuclear industry. There is no limits. They can do whatever they want. Nobody's to hold them accountable. Anybody even try to have a conversation is set up on by 1,000 public relation firms. France's new generation nuclear plant delayed again. And again, and again, and again, and again. 12 years later, still delayed again. Is a $22 billion joint magnet the holy grail of clean energy? No. Geothermal is the holy grail of clean energy. $22 billion magnet. Any idea how many geothermal outfits you can build for $22 billion? Most carbon-intensive thing in human history and most resource-intensive thing in human history is nuclear, and fusion is no exception. Heart disease causes early brain dysfunction and can trouble key Alzheimer's protein. Heart disease and Alzheimer's are a direct result of being poisoned by man-made anthropogenic radiation. Gee, what a coincidence. University of Sheffield. They're incredible. French nuclear power push sends energy giant EDF in a downward spiral. Yeah, that's putting it bluntly. France fires up their coal power in policy reversal over feared nuclear shortfall, which spiraled and over half the fleet shutting down. The reactors at the end of their life, now they're saying they're going to have a nuclear renaissance, where the reactors are all falling apart and they don't have enough water to cool them down on top of it. Certainly, if you don't have enough water to cool down the current reactors, building new ones is pretty idiotic. That's nuclear. That's nuclear, though. If it's idiotic and nuclear is involved, it's going to manifest. What's wrong with coal? Coal doesn't cover the planet in emissions pulsing energy every second for millions of years. Anything that does that is nuclear. And we got 80 years of it bioaccumulating into the biosphere. It never goes away. It's always pulsing energy. France's nuclear champion sacrificed to starve off energy crisis. Sacrificed. Sacrifice is what nuclear does to you. It sacrifices you and 8 million species. It's disgusting. It's a disgusting coward industry. Macron's nuclear populism exposes the abject failure of our energy policy. Failure! You've been taken over by the nuclear industry. You've been hostages. Your whole planet is hostage to a idiot machine known as nuclear. It's an absolute. If you want to talk stupid, nuclear is where you head for. If nuclear power is the key to Canada's green, nuclear. Ottawa needs to say so now. What you're looking at in these stories is pure desperation. It's despair from the nuclear industry. But there's such a dangerous industry. Now's the time to get your foot under their throat and keep it there till they choke. The International Energy Agency praises Canada's clean energy transition efforts. The year before, Ontario, shut down 700 plus renewable companies, because they were competing with the nuclear industry directly. It's disgusting. It's not acceptable. The United States and China could soon be in a race for nuclear-powered satellites. Nuclear-powered satellites. The industry doesn't care. Nuclear butt plugs, if they thought they can sell them, they'd be on the market a long time ago. The industry is nothing but goblins. They would poison everybody gladly, and they did. They have no remorse, and there's no accountability. And then someone like me dare speak out, and you can barely get a dozen people on your videos. They took down my site with 24,000 plus subscribers last year with no strikes. Just disappeared me off the internet. And that was effective. They got rid of my support. But they didn't get rid of me, and they can't. In 1,000 years, my voice will still be out there. Police hunt for large drones seen flying over Folksmark nuclear plant. Not coal plant, not oil plant, not gas plant. They couldn't care less. Nuclear plant. They're not nuclear plants per se, they're nuclear disease factories. That's all they actually are. U.S. must compensate islanders for Pacific nuclear testing. Well, you should evacuate them and compensate them. You can't live in these environments. Just one of the Americans' bombs was equal to 1,000 plus Nagasaki bombs going off in the Marshall Islands. That's a nuclear war. It never goes away, see? End of the world warning, a scientist fears sixth mass extinction progress. It's Fukushima. It's exterminating all the species. We do research expeditions year after year after year. Fukushima is the extinction event. Look at them with their tungsten vest on to your right and a handmade rubber vest to your left. That's better than nothing, I suppose. Look how all the ground is covered with steel plates. Look at the 7,000 employees. Oh, that's right, there's nobody there. They keep running out of homeless. They keep having to evacuate the nuclear disasters. To the right and to the left are the official pictures. Which one do you think is real? That's the nuclear industry, and that's your children on the ground, folks. Think about 30 years of Simpsons. Think about the people on the right pretending they're in a reactor fuel pool, number 4 to the left, that doesn't even exist. We still got to do a show on the marine die-offs for 2022. That's going to be a huge, long day for me. 3 Mile Island, what was once too cheap to meter is now too toxic to clean up. Here's one of my favorites. Fukushima government opened a sake shop in New York City. They took the food, the rice that nobody would buy because it's too radioactive, and made sake out of it. And then opened a shop in New York City to poison you right in your communities. It's hard to imagine something more frightening than 5-year-olds marching off to radiated school playgrounds with Geiger counters. It was 70-something thousand of them. Rather than evacuate them, they gave them fake dosimeters that were pointless, and to convince them that everything was okay. Why nuclear power can never be green? Besides the fact that it's a genocide omnicide machine, it's the most resource-intensive energy in human history. It only uses the best of the best of the best materials. The current one they're building in the United Kingdom is the biggest construction project, not just nuclear plant, or power plant, but the biggest construction project on Earth in human history. And they call it carbon-free every time you mention it. Taipei Times, which is owned by nobody in Taiwan. Talks focus on ending Japan's food ban, which they did, with a handshake, by the way, with no academics involved, no universities involved. And they just lifted the ban like it doesn't matter, because it took them a few years to get somebody in the key position, and then with a handshake it was lifted. No scientists needed. In 2018, they had a referendum. The referendum's only good for 2 years. As soon as the 2 years is up, they went to work to remove the restrictions. No more referendums, because the referendum had voted no. We don't want food from a despicable, disgusting, idiot nuclear wasteland. Taiwan's KMT says public health more important when considering Fukushima food import. Canada removed all restrictions after 93 days and poisoned everybody in Canada. Just on that alone, everybody in Canada should call for their heads. Should be trying to hold them accountable. Should get in their face every time they see them. Nuclear energy gains support, but current producers plan no reactors. Gains support. This is Finland. The support is the people who put in positions of authority in increments over several years, the nuclear industry. The fake support. Deadly jobs at Fukushima nuclear nightmare. We got ballerinas out getting their picture taken with nuclear detonations in the background. So you know you lost all hope when you see something like that. You know you have no chance. Your children has no chance for a future. Humanity has no chance for a future. They encouraged everybody to build a nuclear bunker because they really, really wanted to blow everything up. And they just decided to poison you with the radiation on a slow kill called nuclear power plants. Accumulated 14-day fallout dose patterns from a hypothetical attack on the United States. For 14 days. That's a theoretical one, right? From multiple nuclear weapons. And here's an actual real one. Based upon 16 days of radioactive fallout from Japan by France. At the end of this, it's 16 days. We're almost here. In 16 days, you cover the entire planet from a single nuclear site, multiple reactors and fuel pools melting down. They're not in the actual model. But a nuclear war is sporadic. Nuclear meltdowns covers everything permanently. Don't worry. If you dug your bunker, everything will be A-okay. Areas crossed by 2 or more radioactive clouds during nuclear war. You call it testing. It's an actual nuclear war, right? This always cracks me up. Every time I see that, that cracks me up. And that one. Oh, don't worry, you'll be totally fine. We're the government. You mean you're the traitors? You got your tungsten vest on? Check. Okay, go over and pick up that fuel rod. Want to hurt me? No. You'll be okay. And the guy to the right of him has a handmade rubber vest. Not lead, like they made themselves at Chernobyl. Which does, it's going to protect you a little tiny bit. It infuriates me every time I see it. Yeah, why is that on his arm blurred, I wonder? Why would you blur that? Did he have a tear? Highly unlikely. We've never seen a single suit that was dirty of these paper suits at these nuclear meltdowns. This is an impossible video. You're not walking away from a nuclear meltdown. You're not coming out of a nuclear meltdown. And walking past that means you're probably going to die that day or that week. Does that look like a 190-foot building to your right? The dumping in the sea was insane because when you dump barrels off a ship, every 33 feet there's 14.5 pounds per square inch. So if it sinks down 100 feet, it's going to pop the drum. You got dump sites everywhere across America, and they're all hemorrhaging radiation all the time. They're all vented into your environment. 30,000 shipments of nuclear waste would move through Ontario cities and farmland. Farmland. What a bizarre statement. And farmland. Over 40 years, everything is vented. Nothing says monster and evil quite like the nuclear. Nuclear is the best. Majority of U.S. states pursue nuclear power for emission cuts. Pursuing nuclear power, a majority of U.S., which is a complete dishonest and fabricated statement, isn't it? It's simply not true. It's 100% dishonest. Anti-nuclear bomb campaigners calling government to attend a disarmament conference. It's the United Kingdom. The nuclear industry in the United Kingdom, they're a whole different level of evil. They're a whole different level of monsters. They really are. And Australia is right up there with them. But the United Kingdom, every professor, every journalist, and the nuclear industry from the United Kingdom, these hate your guts. They are just despicable. They despise everything about you and your children and every species. Ukraine's situation threatens Finland's 6th nuclear project. Ukraine's situation. This is before February, by the way. We're still in January, right? Rolls-Royce brings mini nuclear power plant technology to the World Future Energy Summit. Rolls-Royce doesn't have mini nuclear. They're half gigawatt. They're 500 megawatts. They're not small. They're almost as big as a large nuclear power plant for starters. And they don't even have a design into the regulatory agencies. It's 100% fable. If you like fables, you come to the right place. We're talking about nuclear. Belgium can extend the life of nuclear reactors if it acts soon. If it acts soon. Said the watchdog. Surrounded by farms. What's the odds? Gee, I never seen that coming. Talks persist in Vienna and elsewhere, reviving the Iran nuclear deal. Every time we hear the word Iran nuclear deal, Iran's got 49 U.S. military bases on its border because of Israel. Germany's nuclear phase-out ignores energy realities. Germany's been under siege since Fukushima. And under siege being that they've shut off almost all of their nuclear plants except for 3. And they're going to stay online till April. That was the only extension they would give, which is just a few months away. Belgium regulator says reactors could operate beyond 2025. World Nuclear News, which is a nuclear lobbying group, is not news. They never put the authors' names on any of their stories. Race to cut carbon emissions split the states on nuclear. Without carbon, there's no plants, there's no fungus, there's no bacteria, there's no insects, there's no biota. There's no humans, there's no animals, no trees, no plants, no flowers, no birds, no life whatsoever. It'd be a wasteland without carbon. More carbon and more life. Trying to blame carbon for heating the planet is absurd. This was a NASA trick, by the way. James Hansen had his foot in that door, by the way. Disgusting James Hansen. Unfortunately, we can't really spend more than 5 or 10 seconds on any story because we got thousands and thousands and thousands to cover over the next 5 and 6 days. I don't think I've ever worked this hard just to put all this together. It's just absurd amount of work. And I'm doing it gladly too, despite the fact that it's just kind of overwhelming how much work I've done just to get to this point where we can do the show. Brazil takes first step towards expanding its nuclear generation capacity. Brazil, probably one of the most unstable cities, and they're going to put a nuclear power plant right there in the middle of a ongoing constant war zone. Core catcher casing in place in the Taiwan Chinese core catcher. So what they're saying, if the reactor melts down, the core will stop. They have a catcher so it doesn't go down into the earth. It's a meltdown. It doesn't matter if it goes into the earth or not. It's a meltdown. It's catastrophic. So claiming there's a core catcher and then somehow implying that makes it okay is absurd. Let me see. It's like betting your house and your car and your pension that if you throw an egg at a transport truck, it'll stop the transport truck. Securing the nuclear supply chain through blockchain. Securing the nuclear supply chain. That doesn't even exist anymore. They don't have the manpower to have a nuclear renaissance. They don't have the supply chain. And securing the supply chain doesn't even secure for the projects in the pipe currently. And coming from Nuclear Engineering International, again, who never put their names on a single story. And if you look them up, they're actually a public relation firm, a pro-nuclear lobbying group, I should say. Even worse than a public relation firm. Bennett, the only Iran deal acceptable to Israel is no nuclear weapons program. So who are they to tell anybody what they can do when they have an illegal nuclear program themselves on top of it? And have threatened to use it over the years on a number of occasions. Recent advancement in nuclear technology. Again, there's so many of these types of stories. Recent advancements. No, there is no recent advancements. The entire industry is still working on the original designs. They might modify them a little bit, but they're not different designs, right? They only modify them because of 8 decades of genocide. That don't mean you can stop it. It's nuclear. You can't change it. It's an insidious industry. Its waste is sitting worldwide, hemorrhaging isotopes into the environment all day. The nuclear fuel rods are still splitting the atoms, and they will for millions of years. And they're producing them constantly and putting them in areas where there's no containment. Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns monstrously evil? Well, I mean, of course it is. And the very center of it is Fukushima. 14 other prefectures were banned by 55 countries. So imagine how bad the food is in Fukushima. And now imagine how bad it is growing it right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Thousands and thousands and thousands of 1-ton bags of radiation. It really does, right? It really does defy that there's any checks and balances. Let me fix that. That's wrong. Growing food alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in a no-go zone in a radioactive nuclear wasteland in the center of a massive radioactive wasteland, not too far from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns where nobody lives, is not supposed to be there in the first place, alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. That's stupefying. Well, it's proof the nuclear industry should be disbanded and that this antiquated genocide machine should be taken out of circulation worldwide. That it has no redeeming qualities and only has contempt. It has no checks and balances whatsoever. They can't do that when there's a checks and balance. There's no dissenting voices from any discipline in any institution worldwide about it. And if I don't bring it up and show you the documentation, nobody ever done it. Nobody will ever show you the documentation if I don't do it. That frightens the fucking shit out of me. It's like I got transported to another planet where everybody, not everybody, but except just a small, tiny fraction, the rest of them are completely zombies. It's not waste management. You can't contain it. It's emissions genocide machines. Can nuclear energy truly be green? No. And who would be so stupid to ask that question in the first place? Well, they're not going to put their name on the story, are they? The future of hydrogen and nuclear on the path to net zero. Like, hydrogen, unfortunately, is one of the most resource-intensive things to produce. So if you use renewables, be awesome. But using nuclear is idiotic. That's the definition of morons. 100,000 anti-radiation pills handed out to residents near nuclear submarines in case of a nuclear meltdown at a nuclear submarine. If you're getting a radiation pill sent to you, handed out to you, you need to move somewhere else. You're being poisoned. You can't contain it. For goodness sakes, wake up. India's open invitation to a nuclear Armageddon. And every month, every 2 or 3 months at the most, India and Pakistan will threaten each other with nuclear weapons. And you can't just threaten a country, you're threatening the whole planet and every species on it. And what does that show you about their brains that they're willing to even utter something so foolish? In anger, they say they're going to use weapons, but if they do it, they can't cash their checks come Friday. The kids can never go and have a future. Shame on the nuclear industry for existing. Shame on their parents for not drowning them when they were born. Talks persist in Vienna and elsewhere reviving the Iran nuclear deal. This all day, every day, week after week, month after month, year after year. We got to listen to that. Terrified that a victim is going to be able to defend themselves and by proxy destroy everybody else, unfortunately. EU advisors concerned about plan for green labels. EU advisors. Well, that was still January, right? We're still in January. It makes me crazy just to think of it. News brief, Senate filibusters. We're going through a recap of 2022. Starting in January. Going to work our way up to the end of the year. And I'm just shocked at how many stories we covered. When I was putting this together, I was like, this is mad. This is just mad. This is absurd. I must be insane thinking I can do this. I'm just going to do the best I can. I can't guarantee anything. But just to work to get this ready to get it up and running, it's daunting. Senate's filibuster issue, Texas hostage details, Iran nuclear talks. Shared interest why both China and the West support the Iran nuclear deal. The nuclear has more rights than all species and humans put together. Did you know that? Every time I see World Nuclear News or Nuclear Engineering International, I just nothing but contempt. Just nothing but contempt. These people should be sodomized with nuclear weapons. Sodium success story at Donneray. There is no success story at Donneray. It's going to be 315 years before they can make it even so you can cut across it. 315 years. 3 centuries. They dug a hole and dumped high-level waste from the sodium reactor down in the hole. And they're like, good news, success stories. Testing a nuclear debris removal robot. This is not a debris removal robot. It's a robot arm that extends like 40 or 50 feet from the outside into the building, and it's going to try to pick up a piece of melted fuel scattered around inside, left over inside the building that didn't atomize an aerosol or go China syndrome. But the media is painting it as if this is going to take apart the building. Like, when you look at this, I'll show you probably, this robotic arm. There it is right there. Do you see it? It's a long piece. Look at it. You really think they're going to decommission, take apart, because that's what they imply in the headlines, right? Debris removal robot. It's not debris removal, it's a sampler. It's meant to get a sample. It's like saying you go to the hospital and get a blood test, and that was your surgery, and you say, no, I still need the surgery. No, we got your blood test. That's the same thing as the surgery. And of course, anything you use on an curium environment, a melted fuel environment, is going to break down immediately. The minute they reach in with this contraption, you can never go near it again. It's too radioactive to go near it again. You can never use it anywhere. You have to leave it where it's to. You can't take it out and modify it. You can't take it out and put another piece on it, because it's lethal. It's now a lethal dose. Nuclear power generation industries, nuclear power generation coming back with small modular reactors. And unfortunately, you're going to hear that constantly. That's been just a big, massive propaganda with no meat behind it. There is no small modular reactors. There is no nuclear renaissance. There is a well-paid industry of propaganda, and that's it. It's just pure propaganda that's holding up all the other fantastic renewable industries that are currently available. And geothermal has gotten no loving whatsoever. And geothermal is perfect for every community worldwide, with no exceptions. We have the technology. Even if geothermal is deeper than average, we actually have the technology. If you took the energy applied from the institutions, the School of Mass Destructions, towards nuclear and applied it to geothermal, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The nuclear industry is so used to destroying everything, they can't believe that the gig is finally slowing down or coming to an end. They're doing everything they can to scuttle your future, and your country, and your fresh water, and your air, and your species, and you, and your loved ones, and your hopes and your dreams, and their hopes and their dreams. That's all they're actually good at. They're not good at anything on the evil. They don't have a single redeeming quality. Nada, nothing, zilch, zero. Global uranium production demand and balance. Well, there is no demand. There's an artificial demand because Sprout bought up the physical uranium last year. It was created to create a demand. So it bought up the physical uranium, never moved it somewhere. They just bought up the physical uranium, left it where it was, and so now there was a artificial demand that only lasted temporarily, enough for them to fleece 1 million investors in stocks out of their life savings. And they've been doing this for over 11 years, almost 12 years. The Globe and Mail was probably one of the worst offenders imaginable, promoting nuclear stocks with false headlines, and people bought into it and lost their life savings 3 times a week. They even had the arrogance to demonize me. Proposed plan would see nuclear waste shipped over Highway 401 into Ontario starting in 2040 and continuing for 100 years. Right through prime farmland, in prime farmland where the repository is allegedly going to be in Bruce County. In prime farmland, they bought up around 1,100 acres of prime farms, and they want the farms to continue to operate the whole time. I was besides myself with contempt when I first covered that story. Readers' letters, Labour changes tune on nuclear power, which is, these are political controlled entities you're talking about. They just do whatever they're told. And call that the most resource-friendly industry when it's the biggest man-made project in human history, kind of shows you the lack of checks and balances, the arrogance, the hubris to utter something like that. Kazakhstan provides update on the situation in Kazakhstan in the nuclear wasteland of decades of Soviet Union nuclear testing, contamination. Every community up there got hundreds and hundreds of deformed children. Rising danger. That's why I hate journalists so much, because they would actually say something like this. Top secret U.S. nuclear sub seen for the first time in decades in a chilling show of strength to China and North Korea. How is North Korea a threat to America? How does that actually work? The dumbing down of America and Canada is complete, right? Hungary to become self-sufficient electricity supplies thanks to Pakistan's nuclear plants. Or the Pak's nuclear plants. I think that's their own nuclear plant. They're not energy self-sufficient. Those things break all the time. They're going to poison all their country with the constant emissions from the fuel pools. And it'll never go away. 8th Circuit clarifies federal jurisdiction for nuclear events. Federal jurisdiction. Federal genocide. So the locals don't get no say in the matter. But they're poisoning us. Look at all our deformed children. Shut up. Nuclear research techniques are an important tool for environmental scientists to understand past climates and anticipate future. Nuclear research techniques. It's the amount of studies, they've studied the nuclear elements more than they have every other natural element in the solar system combined. The man-made anthropogenic radiation. When they say there's little evidence, little studies, very few studies done on the human impacts, how is that even possible? It's a scumbag industry. So the people that work in it are worthless. These are worthless shells. They look like humans, but they're nothing to do with humans whatsoever. The global therapeutic nuclear medicine market, there is no therapeutic nuclear medicine. It's absurd to suggest there is. It's like saying there's therapeutic dirty bombs. It's absurd. U.S. Navy's nuclear-armed and powered submarines, USS Nevada, makes a rare public appearance. It's too busy out there committing genocide. North Korea tactical guided missiles fired in latest tests. So what? Like America doesn't do this all the time, constantly. What gives you more rights than them? Oh, it's ABC News. It's Australia media, isn't that right? Even worse. Radiation alarm triggered at Taiwan's second nuclear plant. Taiwan has got to be one of the strangest stories when it comes to nuclear I've ever heard. Was they moved all the natives to Orchard Island because they're bigoted and prejudiced and racist and biased. And they told the natives who were impoverished, stuck on an island with very little resources, that they wanted to build a canning factory for salmon and tuna on their island. There'd be a stipend coming back into everybody in the communities. And they said, well, gee, that'd be fantastic. So Taiwan built the nuclear dump there, moved all the high-level waste there, and called it a canning factory for fish. Try wrapping your mind around that story. Highlighting the science of sound, a nuclear museum hosts homeschool sessions. Homeschool. So the homeschoolers can't even escape the nuclear industry. Highlighting the science of sound. The nuclear museum. This is KRQE. They attacked me after the WIP waste isolation pilot project melted down in 2014. They clipped out one of my presentations and put it up on TV and said I was a conspiracy theorist with real information in the clip on top of that. I had my time back. I should have sued them for it, for disinformation, right? And I did, and I made a mistake, and I apologize to Earth for that. The Nuclear Museum, they're talking obviously in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They regularly have daycare where you can bring your children, drop it off to the Nuclear Museum. You really think that's not indoctrination? And does anybody really believe that that's not brainwashing and overdrive? And that is criminal as far as I can tell? The idea is 100% is to brainwash the victims that go there. G20 momentum for Indonesia to realize nuclear power plants. And they show you a picture of a nuclear plant surrounded by farms, because that's normal. Momentum for Indonesia to realize to... So here's the G20 promoting nuclear power for Indonesia. Think about that. Not trying to solve problems, but creating problems. Shit for brains, Japan Prime Minister, idiot in chief, to form a new group to take on nuclear-free goals. We're talking about weapons. Promoting nuclear and radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland on the other side of his face. China envisions converting its N doctrine into credible nuclear strategies. Nuclear. Why not use the word nuclear? Why use N? Why use the word N in the title? Regulators authorizes expansion of Canada's mill tailing facilities. I believe this is the same facility that had a massive release about 5 years ago when their dam broke and polluted one of the biggest freshwater resources in that part of the country. The Canadian Non-Safety Commission, Nuclear Non-Safety Commission, amended the uranium mine and mill license held by Orano, Canada. Orano is French, by the way, allowing to expand a tailing management facility at McLean Lake. Okay, maybe that's not the same one. Surrounded by fresh water as far as you can see. Thousands of little, beautiful, wonderful ponds permanently contaminated. And it's also got evaporation ponds for its nuclear waste. Nuclear weapons in China, a strategic defense initiative for this century, is more idiot, stupid, moronic nuclear bombers. Literally the stupidest thing you can burn money on as a country is right there. NATO, which is not supposed to exist, was created in response to the Soviet Union. When they dissolved, NATO should have been dissolved too. Now it's a weapons of mass destruction against everybody. It says it's ready to resume briefing with Russia on exercises. It's absurd that NATO exists. It's absurd. And they're nothing but goblins. Everything we've seen out of NATO is just, what the frig are you doing? How did these morons ever get positions of authority? It's just shock after shock, every single story. Nuclear submarines in closer interaction with the British military. The idiot machine. To dominate Australia talks. Why the frig would... First off, why would Australia need nuclear subs? Who's going to invade Australia? Who's so stupid they would want to invade a country like that? I love the Australian people, don't get me wrong. But why would you want to invade Australia for? What's the possibility of that happening is what I should be saying. It's not going to happen. They can buy the commodities on the open market. They don't need to invade. And Australia's not going to be invading everybody. Ever since they got the American military base down in Australia, they've been idiots. They gone total idiot machine. It's just bizarre. I'll keep it rolling. See inside the secret nuclear bunker underneath Birmingham BT Towers. How's their poll going tonight? We got 16 people on the show. We're an hour into the show and we only got 16 people. We only got 17 likes. How is that even possible after an hour? Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns monstrously evil? Who the fuck could be so stupid they would say no? Who the hell could be that stupid? How is somebody that capable of using a computer so stupid they would say no? 16 views and 17 likes after an hour? I've never heard of that before. See inside the secret idiot nuclear bunker underneath Birmingham's BT Towers. Again, like whoever wrote that headline should be dragged into the Medusa Reactor 3 at Fukushima. The Atomic Energy Commission. Imagine how fruity these people are. Appoints a new director general. A new idiot general. New moron general. We should still listen to Eisenhower's farewell warning. Yeah, really. The military-industrial complex is United Nations. It's 195 militaries. It's not supposed to exist either. Hey, what's a nuclear power plant without a bunch of farms? Taipei Times, bans should be lifted in one go on radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland so they can import it into Taiwan. It's why would you do that? You can get good food everywhere else. Why would you do that? Well, you put people in positions, all right? And then the media hires idiots that will write stuff like that. But, like, what kind of friggin' monster thought that was a good idea? What kind of shit for brains thought that was a good idea? Hey, why don't you go down there and pick some of that food and start eating it? First off, you're never going to go there. Second off, you're not going to eat it. Grown food alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation in a nuclear wasteland in a no-go zone, an evacuated area, multiple nuclear meltdowns a couple of kilometers away. It's evil and stupid. That's probably the worst combination, isn't it? Evil and stupid. KMT divided on issues of Japanese food imports. Divided? How can you divide on food from a nuclear wasteland? How can you not just say, no, that's a terrible idea. We're not doing that. We're not going to poison the population. How do you get divided on something so simple? You better get your acts together and deal with your problems. You're in real trouble. It's time to grow up and make a stand. It's time to get it together. Time to stop fucking around. Japan raises food ban issues at talks. Japan says you can't join the Trans-Pacific Trade Organization unless you let us poison everybody in your country with food from a nuclear wasteland. So, like, as far as I can tell, Japan should be invaded and taken over. It's completely out of control. Food import issues crucial to ties with Japan, says academic. An actual academic doesn't know the difference. And it's put up there as if there's some kind of brain. Relaxing food imports from 5 Japanese prefectures is crucial to Taiwan joining the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And not like they're not putting no pressure on them from a nuclear wasteland. Editorial, actions needed on Japan's food ban. So here was a media from Taiwan, but owned by outside entities, committing seditions against the country, encouraging the country to lift the ban, trying to confuse the people so they can poison everybody in Taiwan. What does it take for the world to say that this is wrong? What does it take? You're going to wait till you got all kinds of tumors hanging out all over your body and then say, gee, maybe I shouldn't have ate the food from a fucking nuclear wasteland? What's the point of having somebody in charge if they're not in charge? Clear of nuclear. This is Food Navigator. Somebody you're supposed to be able to trust, but it's actually the nuclear industry with a fancy title name meant to fucking confuse you. Japan's government urges support for UK's proposed lifting of Fukushima import restrictions. They want Taiwan to lift the restrictions. They want United Kingdom to lift the restrictions. And guess what happened? That's exactly what they done. Did they have a referendum? No. Did they have a vote? No. Did a politician put in position of authorities that was pro-nuclear do it? Yes. What are stupid? Watch as the driver zips across the frozen river and crashes through the ice. Why? Oh yeah, then she took a selfie. Stood up on her sinking car and took a selfie. There. You know you lost the planet when you see shit like that, okay? You know the world is worthless. The driver was charged with reckless danger because there were other people on the ice. She went flying down a river where water's running underneath it, and then the ice broke. Wow, big surprise. And when the car was sinking, in her ingenious, she decided she's going to get a selfie. The kids are going to love it at school. Thank God my parents are nuclear scientists. Every house in Tonga Island destroyed, as pictures show catastrophic damage. Yeah, that was a volcano blew up and caused a tsunami on top of that. It was such a terrible... Those videos were just terrible. Punched, beaten, kicked Vietnamese worker alleged violent abuse in Japan. No, it's not alleged. They had documentation. This was Vietnamese workers were forced to work in a nuclear wasteland, and if they didn't, they got the shit kicked out of them. That's the nuclear industry, see? It's normal. It's a coward industry. France should revisit plan to shut nuclear units, says the regulators. They're shutting the units because they're old and decrepit, and they're releasing enormous amounts of radioactivity into the environment, and that they've been bombarded by neutrons for decades and decades and decades, and they're brittle. And these are a high-pressure reactor. Holding in the deep, what Canada wants to do with its decades-old pile up, 5.5 million assemblies of nuclear fuel rods, all of them splitting atoms into the environment all day, every day. Like, they're splitting the same atoms as they did to power our homes. There's no containment. Do you got any idea how much danger we're in? A fucking stupid industry. Seismic hazards and site evaluation for nuclear installations. Seismic hazards. You know, Yukon Mountain is sitting right on a fault line, and they knew it. They spent $20 billion just on litigation. Another $10 billion building the facility that they knew could never work, and that they still moan about today. The mothership of the pulsing heart of a town growth gone nuclear. The mothership, this got to be a United Kingdom story, at the pulsing heart of a town's growth gone nuclear. No, Bruce Power. Lake Huron Beach County has ignited the economic fortunes of the surrounding area. No, they went in and gave the pro-nuclear community, people that liked the idea of nuclear because they didn't know any better, hundreds of thousands of dollars for each organization. And then the pro-nuclear organizations, they went around with chainsaws chopping their signs in two. Yeah, that's not going to cause a divide at all. Not even a little tiny bit. Volcanic eruption near Tonga more powerful than a nuclear bomb, but it doesn't have the radioactive fallout of a nuclear bomb, so why equate it? It's not more powerful than a nuclear bomb because a nuclear bomb has a massive amount of radioactive fallout. You sack of shit, who wrote that? Return to Fukushima, last deserted town. Yeah, just because they lifted restrictions don't mean it's safe, for stupid sakes. Futaba, where they're currently growing food right alongside ongoing nuclear meltdowns. Nobody lives there. They have to come in each week from a town where they live in, which is, by the way, a nuclear wasteland. One thing about nuclear, stupid is prevalent. And dangerous is prevalent in the nuclear industry. Town where Fukushima plant is located lets residents stay overnight. That doesn't mean it's safe. Scientists traced the path of radioactive cesium into the ecosystem. Yeah, but then you got to extrapolate uranium, plutonium, americium, neptunium, strontium, and 1,000 other fission products. Every time you hear the word cesium, I want to go pull the teeth out of whoever said it. But at least it shows the contamination of the ecosystem, maybe, almost, perhaps. Who knows? It's impossible to believe anything the nuclear industry tells you. It's absolutely unequivocally impossible to trust the nuclear industry. Oh, Unit 4 live cam is down? Oh, hang on, I'll bring it up. We might be able to get reactor 1 and 2. Just bear with me. See what the best I can do here. Might need glasses for that one. Pretty small on the computer. Live camera. Oh, yeah. We'll see here. I'm going to bring it up for you. Are you two? How you doing? So this is reactor, still darker. It's early in the morning. It's 4 a.m. there right now. So that's reactor 1 and 2. That's reactor 4. Well, it's showing reactor 4 on my... This is TEPCO's website. Right? They're claiming it's the 27th of 12. Now, that could be a rerun, right? You can't trust TEPCO. And so I don't know for sure, right? Because that's pretty concerning if the camera goes down. I personally think that that's a rerun. That is not the actual real time. I don't know. I'm not calling anybody a liar or nothing. I'm just saying that's just happened to be one site that I suspect was just a pre-recorded video, right? Expert. They don't tell you who the expert is, of course. Treated water. You can't treat water from... If you pour water over a reactor core and you suck some of it up, because that's all you can really do, you can't treat that. That's lethal doses by the liter. If you try to filter it, you can never get near the filter again. Reconstruction Agency invitation online tour. Iwaki, Miyagi, Fukushima, Tohoku. These are incredibly brutal radioactive and nuclear wastelands. Why would you want to look at these places? Will the Taser administration lift barriers on food imports from Fukushima? Will the Taiwan administration? But they don't have to do anything. It's their country. They can do whatever they want. So shut your mouths. Leave them alone. Discharge of tritium. The claim that only tritium is going into the environment from the 1,000 tanks. Well, it's not 1,000. We counted it at 750. And they've been there since 2013. There's 1,000 in 2013. There's 1,000 in 2021. How many tanks have you built? Oh, that's right, none. In the last 9 years. Ebb and flow. Mechanisms of radio-cesium transfer within the forest stream ecosystem. At first, we've never seen a study where they acknowledge the emissions. We've never seen a study that said, well, the fuel pools have melted down and blew up in multiple buildings, or the reactor cores have completely ejected out of the building. We've never seen a single study where they admitted that. The studies are all predicated upon absurdly low emissions, just ridiculously, unbelievably disproportionate low numbers. Trickler residents returned to Fukushima's last deserted town. Trickle! Someone should trickle a fuel rod down the back of your... Never mind. France should revisit plan to shut down nuclear units, says the regulator. That story cropped up a lot in January of this year, right? Holding in the deep what Canada wants to do with its decades-old pile-up of nuclear waste. Decades-old pile-up. This isn't a pile-up. These are in 50-ton containers or in fuel pools, hemorrhaging radiation into the environment 24 hours a day. It's completely dishonest to frame it that way. The mothership at the pulsing heart of a town's growth gone nuclear. And that story cropped up a number of times. Bruce Energy Center. Strong, healthy future. There is no such thing as a healthy future with nuclear. There's zero future with nuclear. French nuclear sector may need Marshall Plan of aid, says the head of the watchdog. There is no watchdog. They failed you 600,000 times out of 600,001 times. Then he says stupid, quite like nuclear, is it? China plays discreet but critical role in Iran's nuclear negotiations. What do drone attacks mean for the Iran nuclear talks? What do drone attacks? These are meddlers, right? They meddle in other countries in order to promote their own military-industrial complexes. North Korea suggests it may resume nuclear missile tests and slams a hostile U.S. Yeah, after 70 years, calling them hostile is actually being pretty polite, isn't it? North Korea slams U.S. hints at resuming nuclear ICBM tests. North Korea says it will consider its momentum on nuclear long-range missiles. Meet the nuclear sleuth shaking up U.S. spycraft. Nuclear sleuth. I don't even know, don't care. I can't remember the story, to tell you the truth. Austria gears up to fight EU green energy plan. Austria is going to sue the EU's fabled nuclear has the equivalent of green energy. It's a dangerous thing to make stuff like that up, see? That they're green energy, because they're not. Senate committee advances bill lifting restrictions on nuclear power plant construction. Senate committee advances bill lifting restrictions. Was that Virginia? I can't remember. I got to look at it now. Yeah, West Virginia. But like, there's 25 states that don't have a restriction, but they're not building nuclear plants. So why would it matter if Virginia lifted theirs? See? Because it's something that they can meddle with, and they did. That's what the industry does. The non-regulatory, and like the IAEA is not an actual regulatory agency. They're promoters of nuclear. They got nothing to do with the regulatory agencies. Outside of they seed them with the most incompetent and scum they can find. Completes a first review of a nuclear higher education degree. Nuclear higher education degree. This is an industry panicking. A nuclear ban by all but those who possess the nuclear weapons. Drones jolt a Persian Gulf focused on Iran's nuclear ambitions. What would you do if you were a country that was attacked by entities that done everything they could to destroy you since they existed? Unit 2 of UAE's nuclear plant to stop operations within months. To start. What a friggin' betrayal that was. They had all kinds of better options like geothermal, and they went with nuclear. Small modular reactors might not be ready by 2030, says former New Brunswick Power CEO. Might not be ready. There's zero possibilities they're going to be ready. It's zilch. It's designed to destroy your future. So you put your memorandums of understandings with something that don't exist and won't exist rather than come up with solutions, which was your job, by the way. Your job is not to fight over stuff like this. It's to look at the best options, which would have been geothermal, and implement it, because the money is paid by the ratepayers already. There's no fight. Your job is to keep, and if you can't do the job, then get out of the way. You should be fired and let somebody in positions that could do the job. Instead, the nuclear industry has taken over all these positions and sabotaged everybody's future. They're your enemy, period. There's no maybes about this. How long to midnight the doomsday clock measures, which is the bulletin of the atomic non-scientists, right? This was created by the Manhattan Project, for God's sakes. The doomsday clock. And if you look at the board of directors for this organization, it's all military-industrial complex. The credibility of a cockroach. Bruce Power is key to Ontario economic recovery. Bruce Power. This is World Nuclear News, right? Their job is to promote nuclear. The key to Ontario's economic recovery, how can nuclear be a key to anything? It's the key to disease factories, the key to your children having no future, the key to the planet heating up, is the key to all kinds of evil. France should revisit a plan to shut the nuclear units, says the regulators. Right, that story came up for weeks, eh? Military seeks to boost Watts Bar nuclear plant tritium output. By the way, did you know tritium is used to double the capacity of a nuclear weapon, or even worse? The harmless tritium. In Watts Bar, Unit 2 took 43 years to get it into production. 43 years. Which is the last power plant to come online in America. Bruce Power announces several MCR contracts with all Ontario-based companies here in Canada. Small reactors, basically. Again, these don't exist, not even on paper. And they're signing memorandums of understanding for something that doesn't even exist. Because it's nuclear. And it screws up your future and everybody else's. Colorado Spring Gazette, Colorado needs nuclear power too. Why? You're actually perfect spot for geothermal, which needs no storage. Because stupid is contagious in the nuclear industry. The Dems feel the heat ahead of the nuclear defeat. To shore up the Voting Rights Act protection and enact federal election standards by changing the Chamber's rule to circumvent the universal opposition of their Republican colleagues. I can't remember. Was that story... Because there was... Never mind. I'm not even sure. FBI once confiscated a student's paper for designing a nuclear bomb. The FBI. That was a failure and a half, the FBI. New Net Zero Partnership fights climate change. Net Zero Partnership. Every time I heard of Net Zero, which was a paper by Miles Allen, who's now got a cushy job at Oxford in the United Kingdom, for promoting net zero. Carbon free was popularized by BP Oil to vilify and demonize you for wanting oil, and not for them buying a stupid ship with a drunken skipper. Estonia could get a nuclear power plant, says the Prime Minister. Estonia, which can't even manage their sewage. Lithuania to tackle Soviet area waste store. And the Soviets still got tons and tons of waste facilities that haven't been touched, that are hemorrhaging into the environment. Like Arriva Bay is still a disaster. Decades and decades and decades of abandoned outdoor fuel pools stuffed, hemorrhaging into the environment constantly. And piece of shit nuclear industry. It's a disgusting industry. Time about disgusting is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns monstrously evil. I don't know, Dana. Is growing food alongside of 1-ton bags radiation evil? In a nuclear wasteland a couple of miles away from multiple ongoing nuclear meltdowns? Or is it just stupid? If that's not proof the industry is stupid and evil, what actually is, I wonder? What is? I give up. See that amount? Under that is an absurd amount of nuclear waste. Right alongside a massive community on top of that. Robot for removing nuclear fuel debris at Fukushima. We already covered that robot, right? It's not a robot. It's just it's an arm. Once you stick it in, they get a little sample. That's what its job. It's not there to decommission it. Now the robot arm is too close to get to ever again. Welcome to Stupid Land. We're talking about nuclear. If you've never been here, hang around. Tons of laughs. South Korea ignites a spark of nuclear fusion hope. South Korea. I don't even know where to start with some of these stories. There's so many things wrong with South Korea nuclear. They just opened up a reactor that's been closed for 5 years. Now the reactor should never be opened again. The reason is they closed it for 5 years because of an earthquake. And they think there's not going to be another earthquake. I don't understand how the world can sit in silence. I don't understand it. Discussing intersectionality in the nuclear field. Like trying to discuss anything in a nuclear field, it's better just to run your head into a wall. Colorado needs nuclear power too. One thing about nuclear, man, is how these people can even tie their own shoes, I can't work it out. Russia, Iranian president meets amid talks on Iran nuclear deal. So there's so much effort gone into stopping Iran from having the capacity to build its own nuclear weapon. Sanctions, military bases, brutal sanctions, land, sea, air embargoes. North Korea hints at resuming nuclear ICBM tests to counter the U.S. Well, what are they supposed to do? Like, I don't condone it. I don't agree with them doing nuclear. But what are they supposed to do? With the constant demonization, what would you do if you were that country? You do the same thing. And that's what the industry wants them to do, by the way. In tiny Wyoming town, Bill Gates, who's never been there, who's never walked the site, never shook a hand there, who's never gonna go there, that spot is gonna be running until 2025 on coal. Then it has to shut down and decommission. before they can start thinking about restructuring it for nuclear. It's meant to promote nuclear. It's not meant, right? Because they raised less than $1 billion. What the fuck are they going to do with a nuclear site with less than $1 billion? They're going to do nothing. They do nothing. Fact check: Tonga volcanic eruption was not a nuclear explosion. Writers, fact checkers. Well, how do we know? Now that you mention it, how do we know it wasn't? Does anybody really think that the industry wouldn't do that? Is anybody actually gullible to think the industry wouldn't do it? Nuclear power submarines from Australia. And why did it come up in the first place? Because there's something else going on. Nuclear power submarines for Australia. Like, good God, man. What kind of idiot are you people to think that you need nuclear submarines in Australia? You can't even deal with the medical waste you got, and you want to bury it in Kimba in a prime farm area. It's so stupid. That's the nuclear industry. Don't get upset. That's the nuclear industry. They're murders and sadistic mass genocide, omnicide machines. I'm glad to see everybody's chatting about all these stories in the comments section. Well, that's right, they're not. Too many stories to keep track of. A few of you are. What have we got here? 18 votes. 18 people. I've never seen it that low before in my life. After all these years, I've never seen that tiny number before. Welcome to the stupid world of nuclear. Westinghouse allies with the Czech suppliers ahead of reactor projects. Czech supplier Westinghouse went bankrupt, got bought by Brookfield in Canada, and now is just an idiot machine. Gee, I've never seen that before. A nuclear power plant surrounded by farms. That's amazing. Nuclear death food. All these plants are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. Hang on. Who knows, man? Who knows? Just keep her trying to roll, baby. Roll. Ooh. Like in the background, you can kind of see a little house there. You see the farms. You can see the farms. I see farms everywhere. Nuclear nightmares. Rocky Flats. Oh, in Rocky Flats. Why is Rocky Flats refuge on former nuclear weapons plants and wants to be a good neighbor? They closed Rocky Flats because of decades of releases there, and the FBI actually had to go there and close it, right? And now they're going to turn it, a few years later, they're going to turn it into a wildlife refuge, which is common, by the way, right? To trick you and manipulate you, and to trick you into going out there and hanging into the nuclear wasteland itself. The industry is nothing but disgusting parasites. Northern Nuclear Alliance and Jacobs, which is a big nuclear industry corporation, taking nuclear industry forward together. Forward together. Nuclear industry does never go forward. It's always backwards, and it's always going to emit into your environment. There's no redeeming qualities in nuclear. Nothing. The France's, Electric de France, woes won't derail a pro-nuclear election stance. Pro-nuclear election stance. In other words, they're not going to elect people that are pro-nuclear in France. World recognizes Pakistan as a peaceful and responsible nuclear state. Says who? Says the nuclear industry only. Nobody in their right mind that looks at a nuclear state is going to say they're responsible and peaceful. They're peaceful. There's no such thing as peaceful nuclear weapons. Lawmakers asked the EU to give public a say on green investment rules, and the EU says not a chance. Colorado Spring, right, getting a lot of promotion from the media in Colorado to promote nuclear. What do you need nuclear for? You don't. Dems feel the heat ahead of nuclear defeat. North Korea warns may rethink moratorium on nuclear missiles tests. Can you blame them? I don't agree with it, but can you blame them? Everybody attacking them, and they've never attacked anybody in 70 years. Russia drones over a Swedish nuclear power plant. Anybody really think that wasn't the military? Huh? Does anybody really believe that wasn't the military itself doing that? Why is anybody going to fly a drone over a nuclear plant, for starters? Because all they're going to do is enact all kinds of laws and restrict your drones. Executive returns to, not theirs, but yours. Executive returns to Westinghouse Electric as CTO following a government post. That's the worst of both worlds. They work for the government, they work for Westinghouse, work for the government, then they go back and work for Westinghouse. You really think that's not a lobbyist? You really think that's not going to turn out bad for everybody? You really think that's not a goblin? You really think that's not a piece of shit? You're wrong. Working paper and strategic risk reduction. How can you reduce the risk when all nuclear is hemorrhaging into the environment anyway? You don't need a nuclear war. You already had multiple nuclear wars. You called it nuclear testing. Kishida to discuss nuclear-free world with Biden. Yeah. Kishida's shipping radioactive food from the nuclear wasteland worldwide. And he's talking about nuclear bombs, that he's anti-nuclear. Small modular reactor market growing rapidly. No, it's not. There is no small modular reactors. They can't grow when there's neither one. Right? They got an absurd system set up to hoodwink the entire planet, and it's kept greased every day. Archbishop invites dialogue towards nuclear disarmament. Yeah. North Korea hints at lifting moratorium on ICBMs. Tunnel complex at nets a nuclear facility in Iran deeper than expected. So what? Like yours is not? Examination report on nuclear power stations plan delayed by 6 weeks. So this is Sizewell C surrounded by farms. Surrounded by farms. keep up with it here. I'm trying. 6 people to sue TEPCO over thyroid cancers. It was a 36% out of 40,000 children had thyroid tumors. That's 6 people. 36%. And you scale it up, that's 360,000 out of a million, when pre-Fukushima was 1 to 2 per million. So when I see headlines like that, that infuriates me that people are that actually evil. Drone flights over nuclear plants sparks a Swedish investigation that resulted in restrictions of drones forever after, right? That was them. They done it themselves. Warning over South Africa's Coburg after Matashi boost nuclear regulators board boots. So that the checks and balances that were required by the government to be there, they fired the 2 of them just as they were going to shut down for maintenance because they didn't want them to tell what was going on. That's what happened, right? Corruption. The industry can't exist without corruption, of course. It couldn't exist a single week without corruption. Nuclear medicine equipment, nuclear genocide machine. There is no nuclear medicine, for God's sakes. What the fuck are you talking about? The same radiation you got to put in a repository for 1 million years. If you put it in a human, even their excrements are radioactive waste. But that's going to cure them. Just want to tear people's throats out sometimes. North Korea suggests it may resume nuclear missile testing. And they never got tired of those headlines, do they, boy? They never get tired of it. North Korea is going to get you all. Not the people that are actually doing it, but North Korea. Japan's going to get you all. Why aren't you worried about Japan murdering and poisoning everybody? President Biden announces nominees for ambassadors. It's like that piece of shit that calls me all the time, tells me not to hang up, is a pro-nuclear scum Japanese guy. The thing with the arrogance to call me up and tell me not to hang up. As if I owe them something. As if they have a right to tell more propaganda. President Biden announces the nuclear industries told President Biden who to announce for nominees for ambassadors and key roles is more like it, right? NATO ready to resume briefing. NATO. These people these are appointed, not elected. There's no one to control them. They're not accountable to anybody. And they got weapons, nuclear weapons. You think that's fucking smart? Well, it's not. Mysterious drones over Sweden. Mysterious drones. You can't tell me that was a mysterious drones. That was the military-industrial complex done it to enact, or even the drone company itself, so that they can put up defense barriers that cost an exorbitant amount of money that's not necessary. And you can take out a nuclear plant with a couple of drones on top of that 50 miles away by taking out their external power supply. How safe is South Africa's Coburg nuclear power station? It's a very, 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 very old reactor. It's very decrepit. They use shitty steel and shitty cement, and it's all cracked. It's on a fault line with multiple small earthquakes. At some point, you're going to get a big one. What do you think is going to happen to 1,000 psi container that's already brittle from neutron bombardments after the earthquake? I wonder. Speak out against radioactive waste dump. It's your turn. Holtec is proposing actions to dump radioactive water from the fuel pools that's boiling off 120,000 liters a day into the environment. Don't give a freaking shit about that. But now that the pools are empty, they're worried about them dumping the water, which is what they've been doing for 50 years. And they should worry, but it's kind of too late. It's like getting tickets for the front row in an expensive boxing match, and the fight just ended. Bruce Power named one of Canada's top employers for young people. Get them when they're young and weaponize them against the population when they're too stupid and gullible and naive. Make sure they watch lots of Simpsons. Make sure they watch lots of The Simpsons. There you go. A drone just hit a nuclear base in Russia yesterday. These are totally different drones. For the 11th consecutive year, Bruce Power has been recognized by Canada's top employers for young people. That's terrifying. Bruce Power is nothing but one great big stupid disease factory. Lithuania says Russian troops in Belarus. This is before the invasion. What date are we at? This is early January still. Might as well warn you now. This is probably going to go on for 8 or 10 hours. Just to get through January and February. I don't imagine I can last much longer than I already am on top of that. But we'll see. I'm doing the best I can. North Korea warns it may rethink moratorium on nuclear. Yes, we got you the first time you put that out. Lawmakers introduce foreign policy resolution. Again, out of concern by nuclear regulators, board suspension of civil society representatives. That was South Africa. Well, because he was a checks and balances and was probably doing his job, so they got rid of him. South Korea ignites a spark of Nusian fusion hope. Again, this is pure propaganda to promote fission stocks, and it did. It was complete deceit. And the stock regulators are like, we don't care. That's not our job. Fears James Fisher nuclear building could fall into the River Ethen in Egremont. Nuclear building could fall into the river. What odds? The web of ordinary women who helped end the Cold War. Mothers of the Revolution. You know, way back hundreds of years ago, Mother's Day was once a year where mothers would march down the local road and protest in silence while they're doing it, that the military that took their sons away and used them as fodder for the cannons, and they don't know if they're dead or alive or where their bodies and remains are to. That's what Mother's Day actually is. Not this commercialized fictional fable that they're doing now. And bless their hearts for trying. And the police would come in and beat the shit out of them hundreds of years ago and again today, right? Jellyfish babies. Oh, that must be the Marshallese, where the babies are like jelly. No eyes, no face, no limbs. Thanks to the nuclear war they had there, they call nuclear testing. A beginner's guide to tungsten. Don't know, don't care. The toughest element in the universe, tungsten. Harder, denser, and more heat resistant than almost any other element on the periodic table. Yeah, well, nuclear is not on the periodic table. DU will go right through it. Israel and Iran's nuclear deal. Israel and Iran. The whole world has to suffer because Israel is incompetent and shouldn't exist in the first place. History repeats itself as Russia considers installing troops in Cuba. Right? Provocateurs. Nothing but shit disturbers. There's no way to have a future with constant agent provocateurs. Nuclear medicine market growth analyst, latest trends and forecasts. Nuclear medicine is, there's no such thing. I'll repeat, there is no such thing. I can't remember it. Every time I see the industry figure something out, I get frightened because they're going to abuse it and weaponize it. Iran's revolution is eating its own. Yeah, of course it is. That's by design, right? Sellafield implements safety improvements. Sellafield. The word safety doesn't work when you talk about Sellafield, which, by the way, is surrounded by farms. All the madness. All the madness. There should be 100 people doing what I'm doing. EDF may need to stop new reactors to check the circuits. The reactors just the last show we done before Christmas, the reactors are going to be down for another half a year. They're 12 years behind schedule as it is. Oh, yeah. Where are we to here? Hang on. I'm going to set up. The whole problem is I'm not even halfway through January. That kind of freaks me out a little bit. Like, frig, this is going to take longer than I thought. China views U.S. as a competitor and treats itself as a lone competitor. Yeah, none of it's supposed to make any sense. Said a Canadian-based think tank. Canada-based think tank. Well, why are you quoting think tanks for? They're lobbying groups. They're not. Right? They're not independent. The ones that you see them quote. I'm an independent think tank, but they're not going to quote me, right? New Israeli submarines to have new capabilities, are they? Yeah, whoopee fucking do. They can fire missiles from underwater as a new capability. And nobody knows who done it. International Energy Agency predicts lackluster growth for natural gas-fired power generation. Well, renewables last year was 291.5 gigawatts. 0.4 was nuclear. The rest of it was renewables. Do you think that trend is going to stop anytime soon? Fake news of the week, the Berlin power cut. Fake news of the week is always nuclear. Daily on energy, some backstories on Europe's energy crisis. Oxford University Institute, again, right? Any professors, any universities, you got to do an absurd amount of research before you can actually quantify those assertions. You can't trust them. It's a university. That's the last, unfortunately, them and journalists are the very last people you can trust. So what does that tell us? And I mean, that's really something, that the very last people you can trust are journalists and university professors and universities. Somebody back the military-industrial complex just totally shocked me. That, of course not. OWGP launches UK offshore wind program. Well, why not do geothermal? Why not do something sensible? Why not put your windmills on the mountains where the wind blows all the time? Or is that stupid? Nuclear medicine software market. All that is meant to hype it, right? Create a market. Jailed French tourist who appear in Iran court on Thursday on spying charges. I mean, it is common knowledge that countries will send in a lot of people as tourists that are actually government agency idiot spy machines, moron spy machines. Global nuclear medicine, radiopharmaceutical. There is no such thing as radiopharmaceutical. Let me see here. Oh my goodness. How's everybody doing? Let's check the poll. While we're here. Holy shit, I got 20 people on my show. That gotta be an accident. That can't be real. YouTube, Google must have screwed up and gave me an extra 19 people. Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear fuel pools and reactor core meltdowns monstrously evil? Do I really got to answer that? Because I don't mind. There's not a problem. I'm happy to oblige. There's 2 of me. It scared even me. Let's keep it rolling. I'm frightened that we're not even halfway through January. Because I cleaned out all of my panels, and each panel can hold around 9,000 screen captures. And I lose track, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 20 panels altogether, 10 on each side. And each one can hold around 9. Well, you can put 12,000 if you want, but it starts to be a little hard for the render before you can click on it. So 9,000 you can get away with it. So you can have 180,000 preloaded. And my system can handle that, believe it or not, and it can handle every format imaginable. But if you clean out all of them, or 90% of them, which is what I've done today, it makes it a lot smoother, right? Because it doesn't have to toggle through 180,000 screen captures to render something, right? Even though it does that quite well, but sometimes there's a little delays, but it never stalls, right? And I put a month in each panel is what I'm up to. So whatever I've done in a month goes in a panel. It's typically like 4,000 or something like that. But when I actually do the presentation, you're going to bring in almost as much or more of supporting documentation. So it starts adding up in a hurry, right? Let's keep it rolling. Work in the nuclear medicine area. I kind of remember that story. The victims in the rooms, they're in $1 million rooms, lead lined floors, ceilings, walls, bathrooms. The bathrooms are connected to separate tanks, and those tanks are considered the excrement from the washrooms is considered radioactive waste. So you inject people, their excrements is so radioactive, it's nuclear waste, got to be stored for thousands of years in a repository, but it's going to cure you. You know, if you believe that, I feel bad for you. Nuclear decommissioning market rugged expansion foreseen by 2027. Again, simply not true. Again, the absurd amount of propaganda. Nuclear plant life extension market research report growth forecast. And so I've been going for 2 hours and 15 minutes. And we only got 19 people on our show. I've never seen that before, that tiny number. But we're not even halfway through January. Which means, in order for me to pull off a 2022 year review, I got to pull off a whole year. It's going to take me 12 days, basically, to pull it off, if I go and go and go and go each day. Because it took me 2 hours to do 1/3. 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that's almost 7 hours to get through the rest of it. Or combined, rather. And who's going to hang out for 7 hours? Nobody. Who's stupid enough to actually do this for 7 hours? Me? And why am I doing it? Well, because the nuclear industry is insane and somebody has to do it. Nuclear decommissioning market rugged expansion foreseen by 2027. You're talking about Areva, Westinghouse, Jacobs, your Hitachi, Ancom. These are degenerates on top of that. These are absurd degenerates. Nuclear moisture separator reheaters. Moisture separator reheaters. Anything to do with nuclear scares the shit out of me. Anytime you see a nuclear plant surrounded by farms, that should scare you. That should horrify you. That should absolutely, unequivocally mortify you. No, this is the show today. It's the show that never ends. Step inside, step inside. And so, if I done the show tonight, it means I can't go to bed till daylight, right? So I start the show 2 o'clock my time in the afternoon in the hopes that I can finish it sometime today. This is Boxing Day when a normal person wouldn't sit here and beat the shit out of themselves doing a show like this. But we got to think about the 8 million species. Fourth generation nuclear power does not exist, including in the EU's green plan, is suicide. It's not safe nor clean. So it's pretty rare to get a headline or a statement like that, right? That's the exception. It's normally pure propaganda. Nuclear and medical is, I completely disagree with it. Moscow and Minsk not negotiating deployment of Russia's nuclear forces in Belarus. This is January the 19th. So it took me 2 hours and 20 minutes to get up to my January 19th. Oh my God. And I'm not going to expect anybody to hang out for these long shows, right? I don't blame anybody. It's Boxing Day. You got friends and families and loved ones. Maybe even you probably even got a life. And it doesn't matter. If nobody watches the show, I got to still go and do the best I can. Or what's the point, right? And who knows? I could last 10 minutes or what? Who knows, right? But I'll keep going till I'm just exhausted. And then I'll do it again tomorrow, and I'll do it again the next day. And at the same time, when I stop working doing the show, I got to catch up to the 24-hour news cycle so that doesn't escape and disappear into the black hole on me. And we got some doozies for the last number of days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The nuclear industry doesn't take a break. It's evil, full on, all day, every day. It doesn't take a break. It's just evil doesn't know how to take a break, see? Volcanic eruptions in nuclear we're talking about. Volcanic eruption near Tonga more powerful than a nuclear bomb, except it didn't have the radioactive fallout. So it's not as powerful as a nuclear bomb. Look at the victims in the white paper suits. If you want to know what nuclear is, go no further than Fukushima and the idiocracy you're going to see there. Explainer, wall of ice at Fukushima crippled. I think calling Fukushima crippled, anybody who does that should be forced to go to Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. The ice wall is stupid. Why didn't you build a real wall? Why would you use an ice wall, morons? Dummies. Because being smart is not an attribute the nuclear industry wants, unless you're evil. If you're insidiously evil, you may be. Coolant for freezing soil leaks. Well, you wouldn't have that problem if you used a real wall, would you? Why would you use an ice wall? How do you get that stupid? How does that actually work? Oh, you're pro-nuclear. That's how it works. Japanese government urges support for UK's proposed lift of Fukushima import restrictions. And of course, Boris Johnson, just before he stepped down, announced he's removing all restrictions. But 2.5 years ago, the United Kingdom lifted the restrictions from the nuclear waste down area for baby food and cereals. Yeah? Try making that up. Try telling me or proving that that's not evil. 2.5 years later, they removed the restrictions on food for everybody else. 2.5 years ago, they removed it for baby food, for God's sakes. How can you not hate the nuclear industry for doing that wrong? How can you sit in silence when they've done that? How can you not know that that's incredibly, absurdly evil? Oh, just to be evil. Must be nice to be nuclear. It must be nice to have no conscience and no empathy for humanity. Long-term study of transfer of cesium strontium-90 from Chernobyl contaminated soil to grain crops. Radioactive mushrooms, northeastern Italy following Chernobyl. Highly radioactive Chernobyl deposit in Scandinavia. Thyroid cancers in children and young adults in the north of England. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not just thyroid. Fallout in New York. After Fukushima, if we do nothing, even Tokyo could become off-limited. Japan's senior politician. The government doesn't tell the truth. There is no government. You've been captured by goblin, despicable nuclear industry. IAEA today admits there's no such thing as a safe level and that the standards are based on benefit, not man-made anthropogenic radiation. Which means the IAEA shouldn't exist. Which means that and they know what kind of scumbags they are, because they know what these rules are. Do you got any concept of how insidious that statement actually is? And then to pretend that Japan is fine, grown food in nuclear wasteland is somehow fine. Concentrations of radiocesium in Italian wheat and its products after Chernobyl, Italy. Everything is contaminated. Doses from Chernobyl accident to the Nordic population via diet intake. Environmental studies of radioactive... Again, when you hear the word cesium, you should have nothing but contempt for the industry for ignoring the insidious emissions that are actually not acknowledged. In the Greek fish, they closed all the freshwater fishing for 30 years in Sweden after Chernobyl. Average person in Seattle breathed in 10 hot particles a day because of Fukushima. Top cancer doctor, nuclear radiation, most carcinogenic thing that exists. Post-Fukushima report, concern over plutonium, uranium being deposited, reconcentrated far away. The isotopes transferred to the land via sea spray, aerosols, flooding, human exposure by inhalation, food, and contact. Radioactivity from cesium and plant drugs. So when the radioactive fallout lands on the ground, which it does, of course, and in absurd amounts, it poisons your pharmaceutical drugs, your fresh water, all your farms, all your children's playgrounds, your back gardens, your pets are going to lick your feet, remember? Your children are very close to the ground, remember? You can't have a future if you don't fight back. Your children have no futures if you sit in silence. The nuclear industry is doing everything it can to make sure you can't have a life or a future. Radioactivity in fungi in Slovenia, Yugoslavia, following Chernobyl. In Canada, eastern Canada. Influences post-Chernobyl fallout and birth defects, abortion rates in Austria. High concentrations of hot particles, including plutonium and americium in the Pacific Northwest, around till the end of time. All of western U.S., most of the east coast, Midwest Canada covered with airborne radioactive fallout based solely on number 1 reactor detonation. Calgary Sun, no need to panic, probably, about the Canadian Fukushima fallout. The government hasn't even released the data, and they lifted the restrictions on all the food after 93 days. While 55 countries banned it from all of Japan, Canada lifted all restrictions after 3 months. So Japan shipped all the radioactive death food to Canada, and that's why everybody in Canada is sick. New types of Fukushima forecast shows radioactive cesium, iodine over large sections of U.S. and Canada. Now over the North Atlantic, the Caribbean, the Canadian East Coast. Canada suspends mobile radiation measurements around Vancouver until further notice as the radioactive plume looms. They shut down all the radiation detecting networks in Western Canada before the plume landed. Tell me that's not evil. Uninterrupted line of radiation stretches across the Pacific continuously. A continuous plume covering the entire planet. Health Canada called 300 times background levels, iodine 131 a minute. Called it irrelevant. When it's everything but. New evidence emerged that the radiation in Canada was worse than the Canadian officials ever let on. There is no Canadian officials, there's the nuclear industry. Serious questions of why Canada government failed to alert the public about radioactive rain after Fukushima. Top scientists, Fukushima is the most terrifying situation I can imagine. I seen a paper, this is David Suzuki, which says it's bye-bye Japan to evacuate North America's west coast. if Unit 4 goes after the quake and the fuel rods are exposed. Well, guess what? There is no reactor 4 left when he said that. And you should have evacuated the northern hemisphere. Because your power plant broke down in Japan. The only thing nuclear is going to give you is evil, misery, and deaths. Here's a reporter saying they're at the Unit 4 fuel pool that doesn't exist. I just showed you pictures of it. It actually doesn't exist anymore. It's completely destroyed, completely gutted. The fuel pools are at the very top of the building, and those red depictions, 2 of them, they're gone. And the reactor core. It's an industry of scumbags, an industry of degenerates, an industry of monsters and idiots, actual real-life idiots. An industry of mass murderers and an industry of cowards. An insidious, I might add, industry of cowards. Let me get some of this moved. Okay. Oh, so there. Okay. Just want to be able to find my way back after. Bear with me. Who knows? Let me do the poll here. Where are we to? Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland, an evacuated zone, 2 kilometers from ongoing nuclear meltdowns and fuel pool detonations, monstrously evil? We got 98% of the votes responded appropriately. Bless your hearts. After all this time, we got 15 people on this show because censorship is the only thing they can do. They can't have a debate. They can't win an argument. They can't pretend they're human. Because that's obviously common knowledge that they're not. Beer made with Fukushima rice launched in Hong Kong. What's interesting and revolting about that is the rice is legal to ship to Hong Kong. So they shipped in all the radioactive rice and made the beer in Hong Kong to save on everything else. It's such a evil industry. Such a coward industry. Such a stupid industry, isn't it? Nothing but murderers and scumbags. Nuclear is not competitive and too late for the energy transition. Yes. It takes forever to implement. It uses up all the precious resources and metals and contaminates them forever. Fact box, gas and nuclear are green, not so fast. Well, they changed it, and so the industry will invest, right? Because it's a write-off. They don't care about facts. They don't care about reality. They don't care about themselves or their own children. Why would they care about yours? Nuclear energy is not a feasible way to tackle the climate crisis. Yeah, the claim nuclear is capable of tackling the climate crisis. Those people should be arrested. Taiwan's KMT resolutely opposed the lifting of Japanese food ban, and a couple of days later they lifted it. Taiwan raises 100 tons of the Philippines typhoon aid from the super destructive super typhoon Rai. Yeah, they're having typhoons down there at over 250 miles per hour winds when they're coming ashore. They don't have any infrastructure there to withstand 250 mile per hour winds because they've never had that pre-Fukushima. Wrecks 1.5 million houses in the Philippines. 1.5 million. With winds at 168 miles per hour. Yeah, and how much was the wind gusting doing at 170 miles per hour? I wonder. 250, right? Taipei Times. What they done was so insidiously evil. They promoted Fukushima food like their lives depended on it, like they were going to get executed if they didn't win. A journalist is probably one of the most evilest creatures we've ever seen. Letter to the editor, we need to combat global warming. Talking about nuclear power for emission cuts, promoting it. Oh, no, they're anti-nuclear. Wow, thank you so much for writing that story. Fukushima food product bans to be lifted soon. They were salivating, drooling. That's not how you check radioactive food, by the way. Global debate over nuclear power's role in reducing greenhouse gases intensified. There is no debate. What are you talking about? There's controlled opposition like Greenpeace and Beyond Nuclear and Helen Caldicott and Christopher Busby and Arnie Gunnison and the rest of them. Geraldine Thomas and Robert Gale, and the list goes on and on. It's just complete controlled opposition. They own both sides of the conversation. There is no debate. Never was, never will be. It's all good. Let's check the poll. How's the poll here? Poll, 1, poll 2, poll 3, poll fools. Holy shit, we actually got 13 people on our show after 2.5 hours. It's winning. Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns monstrously, hideously evil? Oh, hell yeah, Dana. Thank you. We appreciate the honesty. It's just surrounded by farms too. And fresh water. It's hard to tell in that picture, isn't it? It probably is. Experts say nuclear energy as a climate solution is total fiction. Way to go, guys. Jeez, it only took 2.5 hours covering headlines before we finally got somebody having a conversation. Workers walk near number 2, number 3 reactor buildings at Fukushima in Okuma, where they're growing food. Workers in perfectly clean suits with no tools, carrying their stupid plastic yellow bags that they give to foreign tourists, wearing paper suits that are pointless. You need a 4-foot thick lead suit to protect you. And they're actually not by reactor 3, they're not by reactor 2, they're down on the seaward side of the pump house. The reactors are on the other side, and quite far away. This is the standard of the journalism, is yellow journalism. No pun intended on the Japanese, of course. What is the wall of ice at Fukushima crippled nuclear plant? What is the wall of ice with no bottom? How's that going to stop it? Why wouldn't you build a real wall? Morons. New Brunswick Power seeks unprecedented 25-year license for Point Lapeer nuclear power station, which is currently shut down again. And they have people locked inside the vault for 2 hours. Couldn't get out. Calling nuclear idiots is probably being polite. You're being a nice guy when you just call them idiots. If you call them monsters, you're still being fairly nice to them. There's no descriptive word that actually articulates how evil and degenerate they actually are. The plan to bury all of the Canadian nuclear waste in one northern Ontario town in prime farmland. Prime farmland, too. Not yet been built anywhere in the world. Well, because it's going to melt down. If you bury it on the ground, walk away, somewhere in the next number of years, one of it will melt down. It'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures and cause everything else to melt down. That will crack the earth at some point in multiple places, and the emissions will destroy the planet forever. Just like going on currently at Fukushima. And when you see these people, you know they're degenerate scumbags. As soon as you look at them, you know there's something wrong with their heads. Not all of them, but that's... if they're coming from Harvard, they got the credibility of a venomous snake. Going green must include nuclear for EU's largest copper plant. What's really interesting about this is I remember almost all these stories, not everyone, but 95 out of 100, I actually remember these stories quite vividly. That frightens me. That's why I'm so angry at this industry. Well, I'm angry at the fact that we're being exterminated and everybody's complacent. Everybody thinks that it's somehow going to resolve. Not everybody, but it's just a small fraction that understands the difference, right? I'm certainly not implying to the current viewers who are not aware, because they are. They're the most informed people you'll ever meet, actually. 260 plus companies demand big, bold action on clean energy. This is time to act now, the firm wrote in a letter to Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, that's like talking to a fucking rock. You are disconnected if you think Pelosi gave a shit about anything. I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example. I can't remember. This is Nancy Pelosi. She was talking about passing one of these exorbitant bills. And she said, the reason we got to pass it is so we can find out what's in it. But their job is to find out what's in it before they pass it, right? No, not Nancy.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
I'm going to play that again because...
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
You got to pass the bill so you can find out what's in it. I got to shoot you to find out if the gun works. New Brunswick got a 10-year extension on their disease factory, their decrepit, embrittled disease factory. And that was the crimes against humanity. 6 sue Fukushima nuclear plant operator over thyroid cancer. Because you want you to think thyroid cancer first is the only thing you can get, and second, there's only 6 of them. And I got an answer already for most of this, but when you get so much coming at you at one time, in 2012 there was 865,000 extra cancers. Yep, but we're not going to acknowledge that. No, there were 6 people, when in reality it was 865,000. Not everybody got health insurance, so not everybody's in that statistic. There's 14,200 newborns need open heart surgery out of 100,000. Don't put that in the statistics. 16,000 out of 40,000 have thyroid tumors. Don't put it in that statistics. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. And that's reactor 3. And it's they put that cover there to pretend that everything was normal. It's just, how can we sit in silence? KMT resolutely opposed the lifting of Japanese food ban, but a few days later it was lifted. That's Focus Taiwan. Japan food ban announcement may be soon, says the propaganda arm of the military-industrial complex. Could nuclear power help BC reach its climate change goal? It's actually illegal in British Columbia to have a nuclear power plant. But that don't stop the industry from being scum, right? Meet Dr. Taco Neo, Assistant Professor of Professional Practice Sustainable Energy Engineering. Just like if I seen him in a dark alley, I'd be thinking Pennywise. Canadian nuclear regulator starts a hearing on New Brunswick, Point Leper disease factory, and he brought in all the control opposition and got a 10-year extension. And they got this disgusting parasite right there. Dr. Chris Kiefer, he's a practicing general practitioner, and he started up a company to promote nuclear power plants. You're going to try to tell me he's not actually a genocide machine in hospitals too? Doctors for Nuclear Energy and President of the Canadian for Nuclear Energy. That's frightening that a doctor can be that degenerate, but it's not surprising. It's pro-nuclear. There's no such thing as too evil. Study shows a drop in cancer incidences after closure of Sacramento reactor may warrant a full review of other low-level radiation risk. A drop in cancer incidences after they closed a nuclear power plant. Jeez, who would have ever thought that up? That's a miracle, Dana. Yeah, there's immediate drop in infant mortality after a nuclear power plant closes. How nuclear kills fish. 17 billion fish a year in New York and 9 billion a year in New Jersey. Adult fish. Around 28 million fish a year, or 26 million fish a year, billion fish a year that way. The cooling system vacuums up trillions and trillions and trillions of newly hatched fish and destroys them in the heat exchangers. And that there's strong evidence that the decline in fish stocks along the entire northeastern Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destruction of baby fish than the overfishing of adults by commercial fleets. And that the Indian Point plant on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water each day and kills about 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in the screens and the thermal plumes. And that there's an NRC estimated 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they're sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. So these are mass genocide machines. There's over 400 of them worldwide with the same attributes. Researchers achieved milestone on path towards nuclear fusion energy. 100% fable, by the way. Every time you hear that story, that's a fable. It's complete propaganda. It's completely dishonest. Those to the public from tritium releases to the atmosphere from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories from 1953 to 2005. 29 trillion becquerels. 29,300 trillion. So like a trillion is a bad number, obviously, right? 29,300 terabecquerels were released to the atmosphere, not counting the water, just atmosphere, at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory Disease Factory. And this was 75% of that was tritium gas and 2 accidental releases. 29,300 terabecquerels is not an accidental release. That's a purposed release. And that's going to be a fraction of what actually got released. Hey, welcome to nuclear. Democrats urge Biden to keep the pledge to limit nuclear weapons. Like they need any more? They actually got enough to blow up the entire planet quite a few times over. Energy storage powered by Ontario nuclear assets. This is where there was $4.2 billion located for renewables, not nuclear. And who took all the money? Bruce Power Nuclear Power Plant. Because the year before, 2021, they closed down 700 renewable projects. And so there was hardly anybody there to fight them any longer. So they just grabbed the $4.2 billion actually. Nuclear is exceptional at being a degenerate, terrible, horrific scum. The Thorcon reactor fable, this is a floating reactor, I think. Yeah, floating Thorcon molten salt reactor to be deployed in Indonesia. Again, right, they say this stuff, but it's only meant to raise money so they can play. It's not actually meant to produce. 90% of the money goes to administration, not to actual construction. I'll repeat that. 90% of the money allocated to nuclear goes into people's pockets in administration for the robbery. Because being evil costs a lot of money, apparently. Constructing a disease factory known as a nuclear submarine. And the amount of material that goes into a nuclear submarine and money would shock every human on the planet. I can assure you. We don't have the time to go through it. We already covered it back in January. West Virginia Senate feels a glow for nuclear power. Glow for nuclear power. What an a-hole to say something like that. What a scumbag to actually say something like that. Nuclear energy is not a feasible way to tackle the climate crisis. This is Jasko, is it? Jasko. The world can't go green and nuclear free. Of course it can, moron. That's the only way it can go. The world has learned to stop worrying and love nuclear energy, which is a play on that movie. And that's the thing about the nuclear industry, is they're not original. Plagiarism is rampant. EU bank may refrain from bestowing green label on gas. Yeah, like that's going to happen. And nuclear projects. Give your head a shake. When it falls off, give it a kick. Huh. Don't tell me that's a nuclear plant surrounded by farms. I never would have expected that. Why would you do that for? Oh, that's right. They're all like that. Nuclear testing downwinder speak about history and fear. The downwinders, the wind doesn't just blow one way. See, the original connotation was downriver, because nuclear plants or nuclear sites are basically alongside a river, so they can get rid of their waste and send it down to the victims downriver. And they flipped it and called it downwinders, and they're like, honey, are we downwinders? It's absurd, because the wind blows every direction. It's like saying a snowstorm only comes from one direction. It's absurd. Everybody's a downwinder. Everybody's worse off because nuclear exists. Every species on the planet is suffering because nuclear exists. What have I got here? Iodine fallout maps. I can't remember. I know that was an important story. I just can't remember it. Because it's a year ago, right? We covered it. That should have been in my handy archive. So this was a fallout between January 1951 and September 1992. And the different shades or places that was covered in radioactive fallout. And so there's incredible contamination, right? UK injects cash to keep sizable nuclear plant moving forward. And that's the design. And lo and behold, it's surrounded by farms. Because that's what evil is exceptional at, being evil. It's really, 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 really good at being evil. Your worst neighbor is always going to be nuclear. How's our poll doing? We got 46 votes. You got a stunning 98%. It says that growing food in a radioactive wasteland, no-go zone, 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear reactor core meltdowns and fuel pool detonations is monstrously evil. Size, well, they only got $1 billion. They need 32 billion or something. 36, 38 by the time the real numbers come in, right? Which is a far cry from the original 12 billion they said. I mean, like far. And it's going to be way behind schedule. Zero possibility. It's the biggest construction project in human history. They're going to use enough cement to build a sidewalk all the way to Rome. U.S. lab sparks nuclear fusion. No. It's 100% fable. It's decades and decades and decades away. It's just hype meant to stop you from coming up with real solutions. Sweden approves a nuclear waste site to keep its reactors running. So it's not really a waste site. It's a sweep under the rug site. Nuclear power and renewable energy are both associated with national decarbonization. No, nuclear power is the most resource and polluting technology that ever existed. It has no comparison when it comes to renewables. France is looking at using more winter coal. Oh yeah, France the idiot got brutalized this year on nuclear. Over half their fleet shut down. Westinghouse announces next generation nuclear fuel enhancement at US plant, now bankrupt and sold to Brookfield. Is another fable, right? The idea of the fuel enhancement was to give you more time in case of a meltdown. So you would get an extra 10 more minutes, maybe 20 in the best case scenario, before the fuel melts down compared to the other fuel. In other words, and they were telling you it's non-melting fuel. Can't have an accident. That's simply not what it was all about. In Georgia, a bloated Koch takes over a nuclear power plant and a fight looms over whose pays. This was the Volg 2 reactors that were abandoned multiple times, $16 billion over the budget. $16 billion over the budget is not over budget. It's a $16 billion extra catastrophe, isn't it? Which was Westinghouse, went bankrupt on it. And say the plants will have no direct carbon footprint. Like every time I heard that connotation, that's a 100% misrepresentation. It's 100% lie. And desperation. It's the most resource-intensive thing in human history. There's nothing compares to it. It needs 2 external gas, oil, and coal plants just to run. Dedicated to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, I guess I ran out of steam. Nuclear wins again. Well, that's okay. We still got a longer show. What shocks me is I never even made it through January. Which is worrisome to me, which means there's a lot. I got a long way to go to get through a recap. So it's basically impossible unless I work myself to death. Hey, I'm in. Fuck it. I was never afraid to work. But it's Boxing Day. It's the day after Christmas. I'm exhausted from all the fake fucking giddiness. I basically locked myself away for Christmas. I don't celebrate it, right? I had to lock myself away from the majority of it. Today's Boxing Day. Come out of my shell. There's no rest the last couple of days. Work. Because we don't have anybody else out there doing it. So it's probably going to take me 2 weeks to muscle my way through it. It's okay. I don't give a shit. It's better than not doing it. We got to tell. Everything goes down in the black hole if we don't do it. If we don't do a recap, despite the fact it's probably going to take 2 weeks to pull it off. If I don't do it, it's all gone down the black hole and all these lessons are lost. And it's an absurd amount of work. And then the censorship is like Madness. Hi, everybody. Let's close the poll down, I guess. Is growing food in a radioactive wasteland 2 kilometers from ongoing multiple nuclear reactor cores meltdowns and 8 fuel pools detonating monstrously evil or what? Well, yeah, of course it's monstrously evil, Dana. Bless everybody that participated in the poll. And those that managed to find me, because the nuclear industry doesn't make it easy to find me, I'm sure. And I'm going to have to give it up because I got a bit of a headache. All the prep work must have caught up to me, I guess. That's okay. Not like we're going to be giving up. I just have to do it 7 days a week until it's done. And if I do it late, like I usually do my shows 10 o'clock at night, and then I'm exhausted. And, you know, it's late. It's past midnight by the time my shows are typically over. And I do that because of background noises to try to make the video a bit better. And so it's quite a sacrifice because you don't have a chance to wind down or switch off because it's so late we're onto it, right? And I'm just trying to do the best I can. I'm not an expert. Yeah, well, you know, I'm the right guy for the job, for sure, actually. It's an easy job. All you gotta do is tell the truth. Unfortunately, figuring out what the truth is unbelievably complicated. Right? That's the biggest problem with nuclear is there's so many lies. It's so easy to get caught in the lies. And that's why we do what we do, is those who are trying to understand what the frig is actually going on, you're trying to give them a narrative where they can extrapolate things on their own. And there should be a lot more people than me doing it, but unfortunately there's not. That's the way it is. Not much we can do about it. I'll call it a day. That was an honorable attempt. I knew I wasn't going to get through it all tonight. Remember, this is the first kick at the can, right? And we only got through most of January. And you wouldn't believe how much I got left. Let me see how much I got left here. Hang on. To get through my pile. Because I'm not covering everything, obviously, for each month. I still got 1,400 to get through. I gotta find some shortcuts to pull this off. It's too much. It's just, we cover so much news, it's hard to wrap your mind around it. Even me, and I'm doing it, right? It's very difficult. Because after 12 months doing 5 shows a week, and we rarely miss a show, but you know, there's a few times where I got really sick this year. And was down for a week or two once. With kidney stones, right? That zapped my life for a while, and everything that comes with it. A fake reactor 4 and fake reactor 3, and they're poisoning you. They're actually growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. Yeah. Thank you, Dana. Don Vincent. James Lucid. Robert. Albert. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Well, it's nighttime now where I'm heading up towards... It's dark, I'm sure. It's 10 after 5. Gabriel Tree Roof. Patrick... Invisible Rabbit, Diane Sunshine Wolf. I don't know why I'm so exhausted. I guess I've been at this for so long. Nailhead, Maybe tomorrow will be a better day for me. And because it's the holidays, I don't expect people to show up. They can watch it when they get a chance, right? But the censorship is over the top. That's madness, the censorship. And as soon as the show started, the Japanese scum were calling me up, trying to get in my face. Hi, Christopher. John Curtis. My apologies, anybody I didn't catch. My eyesight is not the best. Kevin Blanche. Good night, everybody. Have a great night, great weekend, weekday. Today's Monday? I can't remember anymore. Yeah, Monday. And I pretty well got everybody, I think. I'll just do a double check. Oh my goodness. Another Gmail. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Those are watching now and those later. I hope you all have a great day, great night, a great day tomorrow. Don Vincent. Just double check here. What color quits? Yeah, it looks good. Yeah, looks good. See everybody on tomorrow's show. Hopefully. It's going to be random times when I'm doing this. My apologies. We'll see. We'll see what happens anyway. Take care, everybody. Hugs for you and your loved ones. We'll see everybody pretty soon.